So greetings, everyone, and welcome. I'd like to thank everyone for joining us tonight so that we can stay informed and we will be able to make a decision come primaries on June 22nd.
As we look to really turn the page and to bring in who you've all looked to hear from, we want to make sure we maximize the time. We're basically going to bring forth this candidate who you might know under various different titles as the MSNBC analyst, a lawyer, civil rights activist, mom. But for the purposes of this program, we're bringing forth candidate Maya Wiley, who's running to be the next mayor of New York City. In terms of setting the stage, the city is at a serious crossroads. Here we are, still in a pandemic, although the numbers are going down. We've essentially gone through months and months of losing friends and family, losing money, losing everything that you could think of, changing our lives. It feels good to, of course, speak to you all without a mask. And here we are in the midst of an election season that can really impact us for years and years to come. And with that being said, we have a candidate who is joining us today to present her vision and also to introduce or reintroduce herself to you as a candidate for New York City Mayor. I give you Maya Wiley.
Good evening, and I apologize for being a few minutes late. I had an Instagram Live with Senator Kevin Parker, and so I had some issues moving over to this forum, so I apologize for that. And listen, it's a tremendous pleasure to be with you tonight. Thank you for having me. I am Maya Wiley. I am running for mayor. I am, I think, the only candidate that is in the Divine Nine. We are one sisterhood and brotherhood, of course, in the Divine Nine. I am a member of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated. And look, I am running for mayor because we are at a crossroads. And it's a crossroads, yes, that's created and exposed by COVID-19 and the incredible devastation to our psyches, our emotional well-being, our economy, our kids. But it is also something that just deepened and fast-tracked all the problems and crises we had before COVID, a crisis of affordability, a crisis that was our racial justice crisis in this country and in this city, our racial divisions, all of the things that we know have been a challenge for us, frankly, for a very long time. And as a mother, but also as a civil rights lawyer that has spent my entire career working on issues of racial justice, both working on government, trying to get it to be better and more responsive and do the right thing, but also working in government. Proudly as the first Black woman to be a counsel to a New York City mayor, I admit that I felt called to this moment, not because I thought I would ever run for mayor before, or any office for that matter. I spent my whole life doing work in the not-for-profit sector or in government, but really because I saw that as the best mechanism, particularly city government, to do things that were really transformational for our community, for Black folks, for our Black neighborhoods, to create more opportunity for our kids and for the next generation. But that was imperiled by Donald Trump. But it's also imperiled if we have a city government that, even when it means well, does not marshal all the resources of government to do exactly what it should always have done, which is invest in our communities. And so I felt called to this race because it is a city that I firmly believe will recover from COVID, because we recover from every crisis. We do. Whether it was September 11th, which was a horrible time in this city, we recovered. Whether it was the Great Recession of 2008, horrible time, we recovered. Hurricane Sandy, not good, but we recovered. But here's the thing that we have never done in a crisis, and that is recover every single one of us. And it is usually Black communities, as well as Latino and Asian communities, that are the ones that are not recovered. And in this crisis, enough. It's time. And as someone that spent my whole career saying, we can do this, there are decisions we can make about how we spend our budget, about what kind of programs we see as valuable and saving a generation of our kids, around how we see our communities, and the belief and knowledge that communities are innovators and have done some incredible things that government can build up and expand and have greater impact because it identifies the innovation that happens in our communities. And that's the kind of government I want. But more importantly, that's the only kind of government that's going to finally do what we need done, which is to invest in our communities to the degree that they deserve and make sure all our kids, and mine are 20 and 17, born and raised in Brooklyn, don't want to live anywhere else, that they can actually have a life here. And I mean a life where they can afford the rent. I mean a life where all our kids, my kids have been fortunate, can have a quality education and have real opportunities and know that they can be both safe from crime, and safe from police violence. And the reality is we don't have to choose between the two of those. We can have both. So this is why I'm running, because there's never been a bigger opportunity to finally do the right thing and to actually say that Black Lives Matter. And so I've got plans, and we can talk more about them, but quickly, and just to name a few of my big ones. One, I have a plan to make sure we are safe from crime, because I know that for so many, crime is job one. And for our communities, crime also means about investing in our kids and saving our communities and making sure they have a bright future. So it's a smart balance of focusing the police on the actual job of policing and doing it right, doing it fairly, doing it effectively, which actually doesn't happen in too many of our communities. In fact, we may have the highest murder rates. We also have the highest rates of unsolved murders. Literally 20% more murders are solved in white communities than in our communities. But the other thing is to recognize that smart policing is not asking police officers to do a job that is not theirs to do. And we have at least 40% of our calls to New York City Police Department are for mental health crisis response, things that we need a mental health expert to respond to. We actually make our community safer when we respond with what communities need, particularly if it's a mental health crisis. So I'm going to have mental health crisis responders. I'm going to make sure that we're pulling out of the police department things we don't need a badge and a gun for, shifting those resources so we're investing in the right response to solve the actual problems people are calling for right now. But we're also thirdly going to have to do accountability better and differently. And as someone who has not only worked at the ACLU and the NAACP Legal Defense Fund, not only did I found a not-for-profit organization where our mission was to dismantle structural racism. And that was our mission in 2002, before anyone was talking about structural racism. But I have also chaired the New York City Civilian Complaint Review Board with oversight over police misconduct. And I know how to do accountability. It's not the way we're doing it right now. So I'm going to have a civilian police commissioner. I'm going to have a commission on top of the department that sets the priorities, but also the rules, and then makes the accountability decisions if any police officers have violated those rules. That's civilian, it's neutral, it's accountable. It will include the Civilian Complaint Review Board, as well as hearing the cases that come up through the police department that don't go through the Civilian Complaint Review Board. Now that's on crime and safety, and I say that because we're going to be investing. I'm the first candidate to come out with a gun violence prevention platform. I came out with it back in January because I have a friend whose nephew was shot and killed, because I have a nephew who's grateful to be alive because he's Black and in his 20s, and he's thankful that he hasn't been killed. This is not acceptable, and we must change it by recognizing what invests in our kids. So I'm not only going to make sure we're doubling the number of summer youth employment in our communities, I am going to be investing in trauma-informed care, including trauma-informed care in our schools, because when we recognize how much of violence is about trauma and making the wrong decision about responding to trauma, we actually don't solve the problem. But when we do trauma-informed care, we bring violence down and we send graduation rates up. That is what I call saving a generation. But I'm also going to do much more than that. It's all in my plans, and I won't go through all of them right now. But that includes creating a participatory justice fund. That is monies, $18 million, that I'm going to divvy up between communities with the highest rates of violent crime. We know what the communities are. Same communities that had violent crime in 1993 are the same communities that have it today in 2021, which is why we're going to fix it for real. And that justice fund is for communities, just like we do with participatory budgeting, if you've done that or been in a district that does that. But where government says, we're going to do all these things, improve our schools, invest in jobs for our kids, trauma-informed care, mental health crisis response. But here is money in addition that you can direct, that you tell us what gaps you need filled, what programs are great that you want grown and expanded, what kinds of things don't exist that you want to exist, so that communities have more ability to take ownership, because we know our folks know what's going on. And we need government to understand that our folks, our people, when we experience a problem, we are the experts in their solution. And that is my commitment to recognizing our wisdom. But I'm going to do more for our schools. I'm going to hire 2,500 more teachers. That's going to both enable us to bring down overcrowded classrooms, which will improve quality of education, and have more teachers that look like our kids. I'm going to create 100,000 new jobs by doubling the capital construction budget. But we're going to do that in a way that does local targeted hiring, so communities like ours with the highest unemployment rates are actually committed certain amounts of jobs in order to ensure that our people who need them get them. But we're also going to support our women and minority-owned business enterprises with our commitments with that spending to contracting with women and minority-owned enterprises, particularly Black and Latino, because the city has been under-investing in those. I have more plans from small businesses, support and grants for small businesses in our hard-hit communities that did not get relief from the federal programs for small businesses, because frankly, they were not designed for the corner roti shop. They were not designed for the barber shop or the beauty salon. They were designed for much different and much bigger small businesses. But I'm going to design the programs and be specific that these are for communities that had high rates of COVID, high rates of small businesses that did not get relief, and make sure that it is the businesses that need them that get them. So I will stop there so that we can have more of a discussion. But I'm running because this is a city that is going to do more than recover from COVID. We're going to start fixing what was broken before COVID, using this historic crisis as the historic opportunity it is, and having the courage of our convictions, which is that our communities are not only deserving, but that all of our people deserve to recover. And when I am mayor, that's going to be job one.
Thank you so much for that very, very thorough, in-depth introduction that touched on everything from public safety to economics. Really appreciate just getting that background for the folks who might be joining us for the very first time to hear from you. We have questions that have been submitted in advance, so we're going to just try to do a blitz so that we can get through as much as possible. Thank you. So I know in your introduction, you talked about your 17-year-old and your 20-year-old and them being able to afford to live in this city. One of the questions that we have from folks that submitted is, what is your plan to develop real affordable housing for the so-called verbatim middle class, ?
Yes, well, listen, first of all, thank you for the question, because it's critical. You know, one of the things that makes New York City great, but one of the things that's important to recognize, particularly about Black communities, we do have ownership, home ownership. So but and I'll use Brooklyn as an example, but it's true for Southeast Queens too. It's true for Northern Manhattan. It's true for parts of the Bronx, that our homeowners have both been paying too much in property taxes unfairly. The assessments have been higher generally for owners of color and communities of color than for white folks with frankly homes that are worth much more money. I'm going to fix that because that's going to help people hold on to their homes. But we also have to address deed theft because we also have home ownership. We have folks whose homes are being stolen from out from under them. So I'm going to create more legal resources and supports and enforcement, more support for the city agencies that are preventing and doing a lot of the. I'm getting tired, so I'm splurring my words, but actually do both the support for understanding how to prevent deed theft, but also doing the enforcement where there are allegations of deed theft. But we have to create more homeownership opportunities. And that means, one, we have to, and also affordable rents for the middle class. So we do that in a couple of different ways. One is, and when I talked about creating 100,000 new jobs by doubling, did I talk about that or was that the Instagram Live? This is what happens when you've been talking all day long. But New Deal New York is my plan to create 100,000 jobs, but it's also to build what we need built, which includes affordable housing at rents we can actually afford. So I'm expanding the pie to create more of that housing. And that is going to include affordability. And we know that the middle class is getting squeezed out of affordability too. But I'm going to do something else that this city has never done before. I'm going to create a rent subsidy program because we do have, 2/3 of our city are, 2/3 of our city are renters. And it is important for the middle class to be able to rent. But here's the thing, what is middle class? How are we defining it? So many of our folks, even if you have a good job, there are lots of good jobs in the city. If you're earning $54,000 a year, you can't afford the rent. You're usually paying too much for your rent because no one should have to pay more than 30% of their income on rent. So for a family earning $54,000 or less, we're going to subsidize it so nobody pays more than that. But in addition, when your income starts to go up, which we want it to do, you're not going to lose the subsidy, right? So you'll still maintain the subsidy so that you can continue to stay in the apartment even as your income goes up until you get to what we call 80% of area median income. I won't go through all the details, but the bottom line is it is a subsidy because one of the crises we face is we've got folks with decent jobs who still are struggling between the rent and eating. And that is a shame that we can't tolerate. So I'm very excited about that program. One other thing I just want to point to, vacancy is an opportunity for more affordability, including for the middle class. So we will use the opportunity of vacancy to do just that. And also use our vacant land. We got 1,000 acres of vacant land, but partnering with not-for-profit housing developers and using community land trusts. That's ways we can create more ownership opportunities for affordable rentals that people can own, but also more affordable rents that will be 100% and permanently affordable. So the bottom line is we have to do everything we can. And that means not just one thing. That means marshaling all our powers and resources of government to do just that.
Got it. Thank you. That question more sticks with it points directly to the middle class. We're going to stick with housing, but this question more targets lower income families. Yes. So the question is, what are your thoughts and initiatives to help lower income families in the projects, housing developments, with respect to the housing improvements that they need?
Yeah, I've been very clear about this. And let me just say off the bat, it's personal to me. My godson lives in Soundview houses in the Bronx. This is one, we have to keep public housing public. And the way we do that is by making sure public dollars are invested in improving the condition of the housing. Two things going on right now. One, in my New Deal New York plan, where I said we build things we need built, like more housing. We also fix things we need fixed, like NYCHA, like our public housing. So I already put $2 billion of skin in the game for NYCHA out of our capital construction budget for renovation and rehabilitation. City hasn't done that before. I'm doing that. $2 billion. That's just to start with, but we want to start day one, right? But the second thing that's happening, and I'm very proud to have been endorsed by Congresswoman Nydia Velasquez, Congresswoman Yvette Clarke, and Congressman Hakeem Jeffries, among many others, because what's happening right now in Washington is something that we need to lean hard into as a city. It's one of the things I've done as a civil rights advocate, and also did when I was counsel to the mayor, organizing other cities around what we needed from the federal government. But right now, thanks to their leadership and Chuck Schumer, our Senate Majority Leader, we are in process on the infrastructure bill of getting $40 billion for public housing just for New York. In other words, $80 billion total for the country, but we are roughly half, actually a little more than half of all the public housing in the country in New York City. So that would bring us $40 billion for capital construction needs. That is what we need. And we can continue to fill the gaps, both with state and city resources to make up the difference. But right now it was $42 billion. That puts us at what we needed last year. So I'm excited about that. I'm going to fight for that. And we are going to get something in that infrastructure bill. And I'm very optimistic that our leadership is going to produce for us.
Excellent. Thank you for that response. Shifting gears really quickly, we have a question that was submitted. What is your opinion on the recent surge in gun violence that is plaguing New York City? Do you have any solutions? And I just want to preface your response by saying you did get into safety a little earlier, so you can give us a little bit more now.
Yeah, well, thank you. Because look, I think about this every day, because as I said, when my godson, I had him come live with me, and he lived with me off and on for 4 years. Because here's a kid, when he was 20 with his feet under my Thanksgiving table, he was giving thanks for being alive. That is the reality for too many of our kids. That is not acceptable. But here's the thing, I was in Brownsville, Brooklyn. So I'm investing in community-based solutions. I talked about trauma-informed care. That brings gun violence down, because, you know, we have got violence interruption in the city, right? Very effective, because you take folks who themselves, usually coming back from prison, having committed violent crimes, who become the best interveners to prevent the shooting. So we have to expand that model. I know the city has put more resources into it, but one of the things I've said doing is we're not just going to expand it, we're going to institutionalize it. Because one of the things that happens is they have to fight year after year after year for money. And when they have to fight for money, then it takes them a year to get paid. And then we wonder why they don't have the capacity or resources to and then sometimes not the resources. In my friend's neighborhood in Bed-Stuy, near where his nephew was shot and killed in October, 22-year-old young man just going to the corner store. But there have been a lot of shootings in the community, and the violence interruption had a boundary. And just 1 block away, there were more shootings, but it wasn't within their jurisdiction. It was a gap. So we got to fill that gap. But the reason I want to say this is Brownsville, building up community-based organizations that do the crisis intervention, that know the community, that brings supports and services, is a hugely important deal. Because in Brownsville, I was in Brownsville, again, one of the communities with the highest rates of gun violence. And I just have to share this story, if any of you haven't heard it, and it has been written about. But Council Member Alika Ampry Samuel went to the precinct and said, stand down. Stand down. Let us, very dangerous couple of blocks. It said, let us come in and let all these community-based organizations come in and actually intervene and support. This went on for 5 days. And in a very violent community that has suffered greatly, it is the safest 5 days the community ever had. And it only changed when a different police commander came in and then stopped listening. If you think about police-community relations, we have to balance the power, build up the community-based institutions that actually do the work, that also support the community and support the kids. support them with activities, after-school programs, trauma-informed care, pathways to jobs. This is what we're going to do when I am mayor, which is say we're going to solve the problem. We're not going to arrest the people, because we have a better way. And it is about saving a generation of our kids. And it is in both my gun violence prevention plan, which you can find at mywileyformayor.com, but it's also in so many of my other plans where we're actually directing and targeting resources like workforce development dollars, job opportunities to the communities that need it most. Because guess what? When we make it easier to get a job than a gun, guess which one gets picked up?
I appreciate the drop the mic moment on that. Definitely with you with what you presented. We have a question in the chat, but I believe you just answered it with the economic balance. I just want to acknowledge it. It's from Cortez. What is the candidate's stance on addressing the issue of helping New Yorkers who need to have assistance rising out of poverty? What specific program or initiative or supporting those that exist, i.e. community action, can you kind of outline that? If you wanted to add a little bit, feel free.
I got one we haven't talked about. It's a different one, but it's critically important to this issue. One of our top, I actually got two, but let me share them. Two of our, besides housing, the other top two costs of living in this city and in most cities in the country is childcare and healthcare. So I've got a plan to create community care centers, which are drop-off centers, both for childcare and elder care. Because I was fortunate because I had resources and support, but I had young kids and then a mother who was part of my child support. You know, she was part of how I did my childcare, was grandma, but then she got Alzheimer's. So then I had little kids and a mother with Alzheimer's I was caring for. This happens to families all over the city. Struggling, but families struggling to make ends meet. So we're going to create these centers so folks can go to work, do a job interview, go to the doctor, but know that their family members are getting cared for and not have that become a resource drain, so they can still pay the rent and buy the food or look for a job. But the other thing we're going to do is care grants. So care grants are $5,000 grants that we're going to give starting with the 100,000 neediest families in the city. And by the way, you won't have to have documentation to be eligible, because as we know, so many of our residents, including in the Black community, Jamaican, Bayesian, African, they're our community, they're us, but do not have papers, Haitian. So what we're going to do is say, you are eligible because you're one of us, because you're in the community, because you are, and people don't realize folks pay taxes, but don't get any benefits or services and got no relief funds during COVID. So we're creating these $5,000 grants for the neediest as a supplement, right? As a way to help them care for their families. And they can use, if that care means supplementing rent, I told you about the supplemental subsidies we're going to create, so they shouldn't have to do that, but food, childcare, supplies, anything they need, they're going to be able to care for themselves and their families with that. The other thing, though, is healthcare, and I just announced this today. We're going to create a city health insurance program for we've got about 600,000 people who do not have health insurance in the city. A lot of them are undocumented immigrants. A lot of them just fall through the cracks of programs like Medicaid and Obamacare and aren't eligible. But we're going to create for anyone who falls through the cracks of existing programs. Some of those folks, we just have to help them get onto those programs, and we will. But there's going to be roughly 216,000 New Yorkers that aren't eligible for any health insurance program. We're going to create a health insurance program for them so that they are able to see a doctor when they're sick, so that they can see a doctor when they're healthy and make sure they don't have a problem and get regular care. So I'll just throw those two out as the additional plans to help our folks that are poor.
Appreciate that insight. I know we don't have you for too much longer, but there was a question that was submitted that I think is very interesting, and I know you can answer it expeditiously if you need to. So the question is, what is the last book that you read cover to cover and how, if at all, did it influence your platform?
You know, that is such a good question, because I'm going to tell you, I haven't had time to read a book cover to cover for a very long time. I'm still trying to get through, don't hate me, I'm still trying to get through Michelle Obama's Becoming. But I will tell you, there is a book that I actually go back and reread periodically. And it's called The Invention of the White Race. And I go back to that book because it illustrates several things. It's a history that starts with slavery. But what's important about the book is it actually discusses how we've created such a broken society that doesn't invest in our people, and how we created the invention of race as a wedge in that. But what's so powerful about it is it's all about, we can make different decisions, and it is government. It is government that has the ability to help start making those different decisions that actually start to change things for people. So I do go back to that book frequently. There are others. There's a book called Wages of Whiteness, which talks about labor and the wages of whiteness. And the book I want to read, but because this is going to be a desire. You didn't ask me this question, but this is my desire, because I have not gotten to read Caste yet. And I am sure it will be are both revelatory, but also a repeat of what we know we need to do in this country. But it's really about how we have created a caste system for our communities. But I want to read what additional revelations Ms. Wilkerson, who's an incredible historian, has in that book.
Excellent. Thank you for the insightful answer. We got more busyness happening in the chat, but I know we don't have the time to get to everything. I want to encourage everybody who has come on to please. You have something to add?
Well, I'm just saying something in the chat I do want to speak to, because it's incredibly important.
Sure.
So there are 1.4 million people in poverty in New York City. That's a significant number. 100,000 seems pretty low impact. The thing that you're right, 100,000, we need many more jobs than 100,000 jobs. The point isn't to say that's the end game. The point is to say that stimulates the economy, starts getting people to work, getting 100,000 people paychecks is a big deal. But it's not because it ends there, it's because it's what it stimulates. But it is about housing affordability. One of the things we have to recognize is we have a lot of poor people because they can't pay the rent. And we have people who work for city government who are homeless. That's true facts, as my daughter would say. So it isn't all about, so a lot of these affordability issues we're talking about is also helping to pull people out of those poverty conditions, because their paycheck goes farther. So the point is, we need all of these things as a package, and we do need all levels of government. And I'm so looking for that infrastructure bill from Washington, grateful for the additional resources that are coming from the state. But it is also about making sure that everything we do as a city in terms of what we do is going to our problem solution. But it does take all of us, and it does take a real honesty about what it takes. But I'm going to tell you right now, everything I have committed to, I have stress tested with economists, and I can tell you how I'm going to pay for it. And I would just ask you to ask that of all candidates in this race and see if you get the answer that tells you exactly that.
Thank you so much, candidate Wiley. Another drop the mic moment. We really appreciate you joining us. For the folks that are in the chat, I want to encourage you to visit the candidate's website so that you can find some of the answers to the information. I know that we're running very, very low on time, so I'm going to bring on Brother President Juan Perez of the Kappa Beta Sigma chapter of Phi Beta Sigma Fraternity Incorporated.
Thank you so much, Brother Allen, for agreeing to serve as our moderator for this afternoon, this evening. I had the distinct honor of serving on the Candidates Minority and Women Business Enterprise Task Force when you served as MWB Director for Mayor de Blasio. So thank you for agreeing to speak with us. I know the hard work that you put in even when the cameras are not on. So to our guest, on behalf of our 35th International President, the Honorable Michael E. Crystal, our Eastern Regional Director, the Honorable J.R. Reeves, our New York State Director, who we all know and love, the brother Sidney Moshe III, and over 100 financial members of Kappa Beta Sigma chapter, affectionately known as the Brooklyn Sigmas. And of course, our sweet, sweet sorors of Zeta Phi Beta Sorority Incorporated. We want to thank you for joining us. You could have been anywhere tonight. But you not only saw it fit, but important that you hear directly from the candidate. COVID-19 and the economic crisis has put the city at a crossroads, and how we not only vote, but importantly rank on June 22nd will shape the future of the city for the next generation. I encourage you to share all that you've heard from the candidate with your family, friends, sorors, colleagues, and most importantly, remind everyone that early voting starts this Saturday, June 12th, and concludes Sunday, June 20th. Remember, Election Day is June 22nd, and there will be no early voting on the Monday before Election Day. Would you mind sharing your website again, just so that people can go there?
Absolutely. MayaWileyforMayor.com.
Excellent. So again, please go there and you can see the platform. Hopefully you enjoyed this evening, and you will receive a short survey via email. Your honest feedback, of course, is always helpful to helping us to better serve not only you, but our community, enable us to provide a much more quality service programming. Your assistance in completing that survey is definitely greatly appreciated. So I want to thank the candidate, thank you to the sorors, and Brother Alleyne, thank you so much, and good evening, good night.
Thank you so much. Safe and be well.